Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have a Dark Horse episode. We are going to look at the 1986 self-titled album from Emerson, Lake and Powell. This album came out after Asia. There's no Carl Palmer. Is this the worst cash grab album, or is this a true Dark Horse record? We're going to take a look, so let's get ready right after this. Welcome to the Contrarians, and welcome to yet another episode in our Dark Horse series. Tonight we are looking at Emerson, Lake and Powell's 1986 album. Well, it's self-titled. But Rand Kelly, yes sir, he's got the props. And if you're following horse racing, the Dark Horse is one of those horses that you don't think is going to win, but it's going to pull out and take the race. Well, we're looking at records like that. So think about this. If anybody's a fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, most of the fans are looking at the Emerson, Lake and Powell album as if it's a, shall we say, Dark Horse record. Shall we look at it as maybe a subpar album? I don't know. But I've got a panel here tonight that is going to take a look at it, deconstruct it, determine if this is a Dark Horse record. So what I'm going to do is ask the panel to go around, give a brief synopsis, and rate the record out of 10. Okay? We're going to determine whether this is a Dark Horse record. I don't know. This album came out in 86. Time has passed. How do we look at this record now? I'll leave it there and I'll let the panel decide. I want to welcome Rand, Peter, and Rich here tonight. Now, Rich, this is his virgin episode. He's it's your virgin episode.
Yes, it is.
He's a recent Patreon, and he's just joined. And like Rich, you could be on this show too. If you like the content, you want to join in on these discussions, please hit the link below. We also have a Ko-fi account. If you don't want to become a Patreon, you can hit the Ko-fi and send us you can support us that way. But Rich, he went all in. This is his first episode, and what a great episode this will be. Emerson, Lake and Powell. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Rand started out with this. This was your topic. Rand, you want to start us off? And I think we'll just go, well, let's see. We'll just go Rand and then Peter and then Rich. We'll let Rich go last.
Oh, okay.
Kind of prepped, getting ready,
Yeah, getting more nervous. And
it's the Phil Collins syndrome, where he's waiting in the swimming pool to find out how bad the drummers are in front of him.
Oh,
exactly.
For Genesis.
All right. So Rand Kelly, what's your thoughts on the whole Emerson, Lake and Powell album? And then, give your rating out of 10 once you're done.
Well, we had to wait from Love Beach to this to see anything out of Keith Emerson and Greg Lake. Now that was 8 years. That's a long wait. And so I was thinking, they're never coming back. Nothing's going to happen. So when I heard about this coming out, I was like, holy crap, this is going to be amazing. First of all, I love the color scheme. It's just so cool.
I like the cover.
Yeah, I love this record. To me, it's awesome. I'd say this is the best album out of 1986. I don't think anything else can touch it. I love this record. I really do. And the only thing that came close was GTR, in my opinion, was Steve Howe and Steve Hackett. And that was a promise that didn't deliver. This was a promise that I didn't know was happening. Then it delivered. But I love the hell out of this thing. Every song on here I love, except I'm not real well. This has 2 bonus tracks on the end. I don't know if you can see them. The Locomotion and Vacant Possession. And Vacant Possession, as hard as I've tried over the years to like it, I just don't. And I'm glad it was a bonus track, because I just don't think it fits the album or the band. I mean, I can't remember anything about it. That's how good this song is. But the Locomotion's pretty cool. I mean, if you like the version that Little Ava did, and you like what Grand Funk did, this version is pretty wicked. But it's also instrumental. There's nobody singing on it. But anyway, back to the album. The score opens up with just some fantastic fanfare intros, very reminiscent of Brain Salad Surgery. I swear to God, Keith is using some of the same notes out of Carnival 9, but it's just so majestic and huge. What a very big beginning. And 9 minutes, you know, almost 10 minutes, but it's actually 9:08. It takes like 3 minutes or so for Greg Lake to start singing. And there's not a lot of melody on this song. It's just sort of like the "Welcome Back, My Friends." He even uses that line again. But he's going, you know, da 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 da, and that's like the melody of the verse. You know, it's pretty short when you consider what this band had done up to this point, or two guys in the band, I mean. And "Learning to Fly" I really did a lot. "The Miracle" I think is the best song on the album, and I can't seem to find a live version of that. I don't think they played it. "Touch and Go" was the MTV single, and that was pretty cool. And the opening, if anybody's into classical music, the opening where Keith Emerson plays that riff in the beginning, that's actually out of Greensleeves. It's a section that nobody knows. It's never used, but he pulled it out and found it. "Love Blind" is kind of okay. It's sort of a dingbat kind of ballad. It's not too exciting. I love "Step Aside." "Step Aside" is very jazzy. You can almost think like you know, like New York private detective walking around in the mist, you know, it's at night. It's pretty cool. "Lay Down Your Guns" is an absolute masterpiece. I just love it because it's all about peace, and it's very good melodies and stuff. "Mars, the Bringer of War," yeah, that's Gustav Holst, and I think this is the best version I've ever heard of that. Maybe classical music is, you know, I don't know if everybody's into it or not, talking about this album, but the version of that with this band is just phenomenal. And the bonus tracks, "Locomotion" and "Vacant Possession," you know, they're okay. I don't, like I said before, I don't really like "Vacant Possession." Now, when you've got the E.L. Powell LP, those two bonus tracks weren't even there. We didn't even know about those. I think, as I recall, they put those singles on the backside of "Touch and Go" with the 45, but I could be wrong. But anyways, there's that. There's an album they put out much later called "The Sprocket Sessions" on CD, and it has some Emerson, Lake and Palmer material because they were just like rehearsing and stuff, getting ready for the 1986 tour. So they do the score, "Learning to Fly," "The Miracle," "Knife Edge," "Tarkus," "Pictures at an Exhibition," "Lucky Man" excerpt, "Still You Turn Me On," "Love Blind," "Mars, Bringer of War," "Touch and Go," and "Pirates." 3-piece band, no orchestra, doing "Mars, Bringer of War," and "Pirates." That's pretty amazing. Then they had the tour, and then I found this. This was really hard to find. This is the tour. And it was recorded live in Lakeland, Florida in November 1986. The score, "Touch and Go," "Knife Edge," "Pirates," "From the Beginning," "Lucky Man," "Fanfare for the Common Man," "Mars, Bringer of War," drum solo, medley, "Carnival 9," "Second Impression," "America," and "Rondo." And I love this record. I do.
Well, what would you
give
give? A 9.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 is because, I'd like to say Cozy Powell stepped into the drum seat so well. I mean, he is a monster on this album. He's playing with big, thick sticks, and he's just pounding away. You know, it's no wonder Black Sabbath wanted him, you know, through the years and stuff, because he's just a monster. But yeah, I was just gonna say that the only reason I didn't give it a 10 was for "Love Blind." I just don't like that song.
Well, let me ask you this, Rand, because when this album came out back in the day, okay, the only reason they don't have Carl Palmer is because Carl was playing in Asia.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Hey, if they want to continue on and Carl can't fill that drum spot, I'm all for them going on. Do you think that this album might have been received better had Carl Palmer been in that drum seat?
Yeah.
You think that
Yeah,
would have made a big difference?
Well, I don't,
Because this
I'm not-
album really didn't do very much.
Well, I'm not too sure because hardly anybody knew who Cozy Powell was.
Right.
And, I'm not too sure about, I mean, he was with the Michael Schenker group, and stuff, but.
Well, Cozy played with tons of people,
Oh, I know. Jeff Beck and stuff before this, but what I'm saying is that Love Beach was such a disaster for them as far as sales and everything like that. And all the excuses in the world couldn't solve any of that. Probably coming back with Cozy Powell was the best idea. I don't know if Emerson, Lake and Palmer would have been able to get the what do you call it? The major success that they had in 1986. It was a different time. And this sticks out like a sore thumb. Like I said, the only thing close to it that I can think of is like European bands like Universe Zero. They were doing some crazy stuff, but they're from Belgium. This is England, and nothing out of England sounds like this in 86. Not one album.
Well, you have a good point, because think about 1986. There's nothing else. No one's doing anything like that at this point,
I know. I mean, I'm having a hard time finding prog in 86. I started getting into metal because I couldn't get into prog. I mean, I couldn't find new prog, not in 86. Of course, there was Marillion, but that's, Marillion Saga, some of those bands, you could, but, and of course, Rush, this was,
well, it's just the
right
fact that
Power Windows.
Emerson, Lake, well, I'll throw Powell in there, and this, they're just iconic. All right, Rand, that's awesome. So 9.5.
9.5, yeah. And the
Okay.
only reason it's not a 10 is because of Love Blind. I really love the record. I do.
All right, cool. Thanks for your thoughts on this. Wonderful. All right, let's throw it over to Peter Jones and see what he thinks of the Emerson, Lake and Powell album from 1986.
Hello.
Peter Jones,
Great to-
welcome to the show. Nice to see
Thank you, sir. Great to be here. Welcome, Rich. Nice to have the new face. So 1986, I joined Emerson, Lake and Palmer when their debut came out. So I'd been with them since the beginning. I like to give some brief background and some history on the album, and I'm going to kind of dissect it a little more than maybe I usually do. It's produced by Tony Trevenner, and everybody's, who's Tony Trevenner? If you have to dig, but he was the engineer back in 76 on Nazareth's Hair of the Dog. I found that. And he was also one of many engineers who was part of Power Station's self-titled album in 85. Other than that, we don't know too much about him. This was not certified in the US, reached 23 in the Billboard Top 200. And of course we have ELP, but this time P is for Mr. Powell. So I'm going to make a list here. So what's gone? Well, the heavy, classically influenced songs, other than Mars, of course, which is what it is. There's, to my ears, not nearly as varied a collection of keyboard tonalities and usages of other keyboards that he had on previous records. There are limited solo sections, not nearly as flashy or as complex instrumental sections. There's almost no acoustic, and I didn't hear any real electric guitar to be found anywhere from Mr. Lake. Of course, Mr. Palmer's gone, more on that in a minute. And there's a lot of limited progressiveness, complex note patterns, odd time signatures that are very common in the vintage ELP stuff. So, but what do you get? You get a more orchestral, compositional style and approach from Mr. Emerson. He's writing more symphonically. He is trying to play multiple parts from a chordal composition versus lines with accompanied contrapuntal lines, of which that independence of which he is so superior at. We get plenty of keyboard fireworks though, but it's, like I said, it's more chordal. We get simpler melodies and kind of a more traditional pop compositions on some of these songs. They're still very well sung. Greg Lake's voice is still exceptional. We got to certainly give credit there. And the albums aren't like anything from their heyday. But what you also get is an insane amount of reverb. Some for you, some for your friends, and some for your friends' friends. There's a lot going on here in the production wise. And so what you have is kind of a complete album that's both a bit puzzling, yet oddly entertaining. So as a drummer, I'd be remiss if I don't take a quick second to talk about Cozy and Carl. These are two drummers that you really would never confuse for the other. Carl comes from the Buddy Rich tree, brilliant and unlimited technical facility and dexterity. His approach is much more hands driven. He plays on the top of the kit, very busy, a lot of cymbals, a lot of snare work. Cozy is kind of almost exactly the opposite. He plays from the bottom up. Everything about him is about the power in his feet and that very strong snare kickback, but he plays with a much simpler approach, not nearly as flashy, but no less effective. So if we want to make a better comparison, Cozy is more comparable to Carl in the Asia era. What Carl was playing with Asia is much more akin to what Cozy is playing here. So there's not that big of a difference. If we're comparing it to Tarkus, well, absolutely, they're in other planets. So we get to the score. It's an epic piece. It's the longest on the track. We've got a really long introduction with great orchestral composition and playing from Emerson. He seems to be sticking pretty predominantly, from at least what I've seen, and Rand would certainly know more about this than me, is he's either using his trusty Yamaha GX1, but he did also get an Oberheim Matrix 12 right about this time. But regardless, the keys are huge and they've got great presence. There's way too much reverb on Cozy's hi-hat and on Greg's vocals. It's just echo chamber. It's like those old days when you had a Pro Logic processor and you hit stadium and it would just go, wow. It's kind of hard to listen to. But it's exceptionally melodic, very straightforward. There's good, punchy, tight unison sections. And once we finally get to a short solo section, we get some organ from Keith. And to me, that sounds like home. It's one of his familiar sounds that just goes, it's Keith. Well, it's not going to be Tarkus, but it's well played and it's well composed. Learning to Fly, again, is more a symphonic approach. The vocal treatment's a little bit better here. It's simple, it's accessible. Cozy's just to the point, very effective, not overplaying, not underplaying, just what's called for. There's more bass in this. There's a little more presence from what Greg is doing on bass. It again is a more traditional kind of pop songs. Go and listen when they do the harmonies, and there's a lot of Asia element in that. You hear the song One Step Closer. That's what rings in my ears when I hear that. Emerson's solo is nice. Again, I wish he'd selected something with a different tonality, but it's an enjoyable song. And I've enjoyed that one. The Miracle is more reminiscent of some of the earlier ELP. The way it starts, great motifs, strong vocals from Greg. Very understated, but purposeful drumming from Cozy. He adds a much heavier and much more busy bass drum pattern in the chorus, which is nice because it gives it a real nice kind of underlying heaviness to it and some momentum. It breaks down into a small chord progression, which is really just light keys, bass drums, and Greg's vocals, which I found very enjoyable. Killer organ solo on this. It was nice to hear, even again if it's a little bit too short. The drum pattern tends to be a little monotonous as you go through the whole length of the song, not too much change to it. So it's just a tiny bit too long and just a little bit of editing on this one would have streamlined this, and I think would have made it a better composition. Touch and Go, the single, this reached 60. This is a song I'm exceptionally familiar with, as I played this with the band I was in from 88 to 91 in clubs out in Colorado. It's the first song I ever played with a live drum machine, as we programmed all of the background, the sounds, the hand claps, the clicks, the shake, and everything. So we played live to that, and I have great memories of playing that. What I found, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, you can also look at the opening motif riff, both melodically and rhythmically, and listen to an old English folk song called Lovely Joan. It is an exact lift. I mean, to the note. It is a total lift. And I believe that's where a lot of the inspiration came from on this. I like that guitar, keyboard intro. I certainly like it much better than Final Countdown, which was also 86. You know, if I had my choice, I would have made this one in stadiums than Europe. It's a fun track, powerful drumming from Cozy, great vocals from Lake. And it'd be nice to have a little guitar on it. But, you know, you can wish. And it's just a great, simple, fun song, very accessible, very melodic. And I found audiences at our shows enjoyed it, maybe not really understanding who it was, probably, or not knowing where it came from. It was just because it worked well as a good song. Love Blind is an 80s pop song to me. While not, you know, exactly, if you listen to what Mike and the Mechanics were doing in 85, either with All I Need Is a Miracle or Silent Running, there are some similarities in compositional approach, even though the songs are different. Greg is great on it. The piano is a really nice touch with the supporting strings underneath. It's probably one of the lesser favorites on the album, but it's still well done. Step Aside is jazzy and bluesy, great playing from Keith and Greg. This isn't a style that Cozy's really kind of in his wheelhouse, so he felt maybe it sounds to me a little bit awkward. This is where someone like Carl would just thrive, because he could just be able to play this stuff in his sleep. I would have preferred maybe a more acoustic treatment, similar to Lend Your Love to Me Tonight. Your Love for Me Tonight. Lend Your Love to Me Tonight from Works. But as it works, it's a nice change of pace. It's a good, refreshing ear cleanse from the kind of the bigger keyboard tracks before that. Lay Down Your Guns is a beautiful piano and bass song that reverbs back, and that's kind of too much, but it's a good melody. It's a good moving song lyrically. You know, the drums are way overpressed. His snare drum sounds like it's, you know, in the YMCA shower room with nobody in it, that just goes, and then it stops about
it was the 80s, Peter. It was,
you know, stops down the road. Different instrumentation and a little bit of sonics might have helped this up a bit. Then we get to Mars. To Rand's point, I am an enormous classical fan, having my degree in classical percussion. Mars in the Planet Suite is one of my 5 most favorite classical pieces of all time. It's just wildly popular, hugely influential. That opening motif was the inspiration for the opening riff to the Black Sabbath debut song. Holtz composed it in 1914, and was interesting because that was kind of a premonition of World War I was right around the corner. And it's interesting because a lot have said that it's based on astronomy, of planets. Well, no, it was actually based astrologically, more on the signs than on planets, which is why there is no Earth movement. It gained so much popularity that Holst, unfortunately, kind of grew resentful for it, and he swore he'll never write anything like that again, and he never did. For the most part, this is kind of a direct reproduction of the original composition from both a harmonic and structural standpoint. There isn't really much deviation until the end, when Keith adds some punches and some keyboard parts, it focuses on that, absolutely unrelenting 5/4 rhythmic pattern. Dun, 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 dun. It was just one of the great motifs of classical music. But unlike other pieces that were classically inspired, obviously Pictures at an Exhibition, Knife's Edge, and even Fanfare for the Common Man, they made enough changes to it that it became ELPs. I don't feel like they did enough with this one to make it sound too different or give it a uniqueness or their own flair or color to it. So to me, it kind of just feels like I'm listening to a different instrumental version of the piece. The bonus tracks, Locomotion and Vacant Possession, aren't anything special, and I'm glad they were left off the original, because I don't think they would have added anything. So I mean, the production hurts at times. I wish for some variance again in his keyboard sounds, especially, where's the Moog? I mean, please, I need some of that. Bass is buried in spots, but it's accessible, and the pop songs deliver. And taken as a standalone album and not comparing it to any of the ELP stuff, I would rate this a 7 or 7.5 out of 10. I think it's very listenable.
Okay.
And it's worth having. Is it, every day, every month listen? No, but it doesn't turn me off when I do listen to it. And there's a lot in it that I like.
Well, let me ask you this, Peter, and thank you for that review. I appreciate that. So what really hurts this record? Is it the production that holds it back? We're in the 80s. Is that what you think really holds it back, or is it
I think
the
it's
instrumentation? Okay.
Twofold. Songs are there, melodies are there. Greg Lake's voice hasn't aged. It
Right.
sounds rich. It's glorious. The production and the over ambientness of it, which loses focus and impact. And I think the other thing is the limited choices that Keith is using for his keyboards. His parts are exceptionally well crafted. And again, they're much more expansive. You listen to all the earlier stuff, Tarkus or anything, he's just running a line. He's running a single lines, not full chordal to simulate orchestral instruments from other sections without using a symphony. Having it all based on a similar type of sound can be a little ear fatiguing, and breaking that up with a mellotron, a Moog, going to more organ, and a combination of the two would have made it much more fascinating and enjoyable to my ears, and would have tied in better to what ELP was known for anyways. So I don't think it would have sounded as much as an outlier as some people may think that it does. But I think those are the two issues that hurt it.
Well, I'm just wondering how much influence the producer had on this record. Obviously, there's the producer, obviously. He could have said, well, Keith, we want you just to play this Yamaha or whatever. I don't.
Right.
It is of the 80s. You have to put it in context of when it was recorded,
Right.
Of course. I mean, look at a lot of that Chicago stuff. You're looking at a lot of that Chicago stuff in the 80s, and you're going,
everybody got a DX7 and
that was the
went
keyboard.
nuts.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a product of his time, but I would have to agree that, of course, the 70s stuff just ages way better than this.
It does.
But a 7.5 is not a bad rating. I'm gonna mark 7.5.
7.5 is fine.
What do you think would have, real quick? We're good. I'm looking on time. We're good on time. What you would have liked to have seen more types to keyboards, more organ, more mellotron. If they would have redone this and cut back on the production, gotten rid of all that, I'm sure the drums have all that, what do I want to say, that Peter Gabriel thing.
They're noise gated
and noise gated.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there for you. Let's say we redid it and had more of a 70s type production. What would you give it? I'm just curious, just to throw it out there.
Oh, it would easily be over an 8. I don't know how much higher than an 8, but if you get to an 8, maybe even an 8.5, because I do think the material is there.
Mm-hmm.
I do think maybe as a third element that they did make a mistake not having enough of guitar, even if it's acoustic and or electric in a combination with that, because that was something of the 80s that would have fit in.
But as a drummer, let me ask you this. That's
Yes.
fair. Cozy Powell, was he the right choice?
For this material?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
I believe so.
All right, Peter, we're going to go with the 7.5 on this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that. I love talking this stuff. Rich, welcome to the Contrarians. I want to give you an official welcome. What's your thoughts on this record? You've heard Randy, you've heard Peter give their
and I gotta say I'm really impressed with it, the knowledge that both of you have about just your knowledge of the music and the sounds on it and stuff. I don't think I like this as much as Rand and Peter. I didn't really start listening to this album until a few weeks ago, until I found out I was going to be on this show. I remember when it first came out, I forgot whether I had bought it or not at the time. I think what stood out for me was side 2. And after listening to this album a lot the last 2.5 weeks, I still prefer side 2 of it to the first side. Even though Carl Palmer is not in the group, I still consider it an ELP album. It's a heck of a lot better than Love Beach. Much better cover. I mean, that cover was terrible. And the things about Love Beach that stand out are the bad things. Like the cover with them on that island, and then the inside with that that silver mannequin wearing that ELP jacket and swim trunks. It's the bad things about that album that really stand out. And I think this is a lot better than that. And a lot better than the Hot Seat, which I think is definitely their worst album. I think it's better than the stuff that they did in the late 70s, like Works Volume 1 and Works Volume 2. I don't like it as much as the classic, like the first 2 or 3 albums, which are, I'd say my 2 favorite are the first 2. I think for an 80s album, I think it stood up rather well, especially compared to, the Yes albums and like Genesis and Visible Touch. And I don't think it has a bad cover. I think the 80s wasn't a really good time for covers for bands. And I like the one for this because I think it's more simple. So yeah, and in terms of the album itself, I've had a hard time getting into side 1 of it. I like that it starts off with a 9-minute song, the score. But even after listening to a lot, I can't really remember too much about it. I know I like it when I'm listening to it, but afterwards, I can't recall too much of the melodies. And that the same goes for the other 2 songs on the first half. Like I said, I like the fact that they're starting out with a 9-minute song. I think that's kind of for the 80s, that was something kind of rare, and I liked seeing that. I like it when I'm listening to it, and the things I've noticed were it reminds me a little bit the keyboard sound of Fanfare for the Common Man. And there's also one of the keyboard melodies reminds me, it sounded familiar to me, and it reminds me of I don't know if you guys have heard the band Triumvirate. They were a progressive rock band from, and I was thinking one of the melodies sounds like A History of Mystery. So yeah, and I think I'm actually going to listen to that album tonight after I get through this. So yeah, I mean, the score has interesting parts, but I don't think that they really kind of coalesce into like a memorable song. Learning to Fly I can't remember how that sounds. And like I said, I've really been listening to this album a lot, and I can't recall anything about that song at all. The Miracle is a little bit better. I like the refrain. I think that's the thing that stands out the most about that, but I can't really remember how any of the music sounds. So I think I like side 2 better. I like the short songs on side 2. I think Touch and Go is kind of on par with some of their great 70s stuff, like Knife Edge and Barbarian and Time and a Place. I think that's definitely my favorite song on the album. Love Blind, I like. That sounds like it could have been from Greg Lake's first solo album. It's a good pop song. It's not, I don't think it's the best on the album, but I find it pleasant to listen to. Step Aside is my other favorite song on this. I like hearing Cozy Powell play something, play in a jazzy style. I mean, I see him as a hard rock drummer, and really great at like some of his drum intros for Rainbow, like Lost in Hollywood and Stargazer, and his drum intro for Terror Woman. He's just kind of a loud drummer, and I like hearing him play jazzy, and I think he does it really well. I would have kind of liked to have heard a little bit more of that from him on this album. Like for the score, I think if Carl Palmer was on it, he would have kind of put in some different, some more interesting drum patterns for it. He would have done a little bit more with it. Lay Down Your Guns, I like that a lot. I think that's a really good ballad, and again, that's something that probably would have fit in well on Greg Lake's first solo album. And then Mars of Bring War, I've never heard the original, so I don't know how it really compares. It reminds me of the score a little bit, and the fact that I like it when I'm listening to it, but afterwards I'll be danged if I could remember like how a lot of it goes. I think it's a respectable album. I mean, I especially for the 80s, I think it's stood up better than like Yes 90125 and Big Generator, and production's better. I mean, I like it better than Invisible Touch, which I think is, I just can't stand the sound of that album. And but I guess I wouldn't put it up there with the early ELP albums, but I do think it's a good, respectable album. So my rating is going to be a little bit lower than everybody else's, but not by too much. I think I'm going to give it a 7, because I think for a prog album at the time, I thought it was very good. So yeah, that's what I'm going to give it, is a 7. And if I was grading it as a paper, I think I'd give it like a B. So that's my thoughts on it.
That's not bad. I want to welcome Tate Davis here to the conversation. Tate, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Contrarians. What's your whole thoughts on the Emerson, Lake and Powell album from 1986? And one thing I want to add at the end, give us your rating out of 10, because we're going to compile all these at the end. So what do you think of this record?
Not very highly, unfortunately.
Oh no.
I honestly really don't have much to say on it. It's just not memorable for me. That's the big problem with it. I listened to it, I want to say maybe like 10 or so times the past week, just trying to get it ingrained in me, and it just didn't do much of anything for me. The first song, the score just meanders. It didn't need to be 10 minutes long. Learning to Fly, I guess, is okay from what I remember. The Miracle, I couldn't tell you how that goes. Touch and Go is pretty good. I think that was like the big single from it. Love Blind, Step Aside, I don't know. Lay Down Your Guns. And then I will say, though, their arrangement of Mars is really, really good. I think Cozy Powell is really, really showing what he was capable of. And then the bonus tracks, you get their version of the locomotion, which is pretty cool. Keith Emerson doing his thing on the keyboards, and then Vacant Possession, which is just another forgettable track. I felt like with the lineup of musicians that they had, this should have been a lot better than it actually was. This is not the bombast that one would expect on ELP albums like Brain Salad Surgery, Tarkus, Trilogy, the debut, and even parts of the Works albums as well. It's just it's got that 80s production to it, and I just felt like they could have utilized Cozy Powell more. And Cozy Powell is a much different drummer than Carl Palmer is, but I felt like they could have used him more. And I love Cozy with everything in me. He's one of my favorite drummers of all time, but it just seems like, aside from Mars, he really doesn't have that much to do on here, in my opinion. I'm sorry for kind of giving like a brief synopsis of it. It's just not very memorable for me. And my overall rating of it is probably a 2 out of 10.
Oh, okay. I accept that. Well, let me ask you this, Tate. I'm just curious. Do you feel like they're getting back together? Do you feel like they're just phoning it in? Is it just a cash grab? Is it a reaction to the Asia? You know what I mean. Carl's busy, so we've got another drummer. I don't know. I know the 80s production is a bit much. And a lot of those 80s productions do not translate well into modern day.
No.
Is it the production? Is it the songwriting? Are they phoning it in? I'm just curious. Let's narrow it down just a little bit more. I'm just curious.
I think it's probably on one. For me, it is the production. A large part of it is the production.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that they're trying to cash in on the Asia thing just a little bit. Maybe not quite as much, but
right.
It's just but at least the stuff on at least the first Asia album is extremely memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I would argue that Keith Emerson is a better keyboard player than Jeff Downes, but I don't know. Like I can't even really describe it. Aside from what I had said earlier, it's just not memorable. If I had to boil it down to one problem, the Emerson, Lake and Powell album is just not memorable. And I did look at some of the set lists that they did on like the one tour that they did, and they were doing some classic ELP stuff in the live shows. From what I've seen, though, I couldn't. I've tried looking for live stuff on YouTube, and I couldn't really find any of any good quality, so I couldn't really see it. Oh, okay, all right. I might have to get that.
That's a legit release, right, Rand? It looks like a boot to me, but I don't know. Maybe it was on the. That looks like a boot too.
They're both on Manticore.
All right, I guess they're legit.
Manticore 2003, not bootlegs. Trust me.
Boy, they sure look like boots.
Okay.
Rand don't buy boots ever.
Okay, well, I'll have to see if I can get my hands on one of those albums. But yeah,
a two tape. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. It just, in my opinion, it should have been much better than it actually was. I know my criticism of it was a bit harsh, and you know what?
Now we want you to be truthful on this show.
If this album brings everybody on this panel joy, then I think that's terrific.
All right. We're just all about talking music here. That's all it's about.
If we take position by position, the 80s era Carl versus the 80s era Cozy, not that different. They have different flavors, different feels, but that playing style is not very different. You've got keyboard, you've got bass, a lot of people get confused. Is it Wynton? Is it Lake? Is it Lake? Is it Wynton? They're both exceptional singers. But what's the difference that Asia had that ELP didn't? Steve Howe.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Guitar.
Yeah,
And
you're
that's
right.
why I was
That's
saying.
true, but those songs are way more accessible. They have prog elements, but
what I'm saying is right or wrong, people perceive a band with a guitar as more rock, even if the compositions are very stripped down, and that especially the early Asia stuff is very stripped down. But
yeah,
and that's why I said what I thought, that if they would have thrown in more guitar, especially if you're trying to compare the score versus Carnival. Well, what's one of the greatest elements in Carnival 9? Greg Lake's na 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 on guitar.
yeah,
That's one of the da na 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 na.
That's a great solo.
That's what made that track so popular, because it had the guitar in it.
Yeah, and
I'm suggesting,
if I can say something, I think one thing that Emerson, Lake and Powell album was missing was guitar. Even though it's, Greg Lake is listed as playing guitar, I don't hear any guitar on it at all. And
no,
I hear
not in this one.
I don't either.
And I don't hear any bass either. It's like, maybe I think on Love Blind you can maybe hear a little bit of bass, but I don't hear any bass any place throughout the entire album. It's just keyboards and drums.
But that's also a product of the production, Rich, because the thicker Keith went with his keyboards, the less room there is sonically for Greg's bass to come through.
Yeah.
So when he was playing in the older style that we were mentioning before, there's a lot of room for that bass to cut through there in a counter line or a unison line that allowed Greg and Carl to fit right in with what Keith was doing, because Keith was playing lines. And so there was so much space that they could fill up, and the bass was enormous. He'd use wah, he'd use distortion, all kinds of stuff that he had on there that is just buried here amongst that huge breadth of chordal keyboarding that Emerson is playing on this record.
I got a question.
Mhm.
How old was everybody when this album came out?
I was 19.
24?
In 86, I was 20.
No, 80. Yeah, 24.
not born.
Okay. I was 34.
Tate's just a glimmer in someone's eye.
Hang on a second. I was 33 because I didn't turn. This came out in the summer, I think. And I didn't turn
23.
30. Huh?
I would have been 23 then. My birthday wasn't until
Yeah.
October.
So I was 33. And I think you had to live through this to see it happen, to appreciate as much as I do, to give it 9.5, where Tate hasn't heard it yet. He wasn't born yet. So he didn't hear it until it got to his ears at whatever age he heard it. And I can understand why he would give it a 2, because it's just not, he didn't live it, like I did.
When you live it,
I wanted to see these guys on MTV so bad. I talked my girlfriend into buying us a satellite dish, and the concert didn't happen. And I was so, the concert happened, but the broadcast didn't happen. And I think part of the concert's on, or the whole concert's on YouTube now. Terrible quality, but I mean, my God, how often do you get to see this band play live? They were a one and done group,
Right.
And that's another question: is why did they break up? What happened? It's been a mystery, and what happens right after?
well, they
this?
had management
Tony
issues. They
invites
lost their
him to join
management.
Black Sabbath.
But they had
Sorry.
management issues. Everything kind of fell apart.
And
That
then,
happens
and
a
then,
lot with bands is management problems.
and then
Well,
3 popped up a few years later. Then
Mhm.
But he ends up joining Black Sabbath for Tear, isn't that correct?
Headless Cross actually
It
was.
Yeah, it was Headless Cross.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, if you look at a lot of those 80s productions, when you lived in that era and you had the sound that you had on this record, you didn't think twice about it. As time progresses, the 90s progressed, and that whole 80s production kind of went by the wayside, became very dated. I think this album doesn't translate as well, as
think
it did back as when it was released.
It doesn't sound like 1986. I mean, the music. I'm not talking about the production. I'm talking about the songs.
I know, but the production can kill it.
I know, but nobody was writing a song as complex as the score. Do you ever listen real close to the notes that those guys play? That's pretty complex stuff. They're into like.
I'm just thinking it's a bold move. All I'm
tritonal.
saying, Rand, it's a bold move to put out a record like this in '86.
It is, yeah.
I'm not taking away from it. I'm applauding them, but I think when you look at it in modern day, that production, all that reverb, oh my God, it takes a lot from it. So I'm just throwing it out there.
I think for the mid '80s, I don't think the drum sound is that bad. I think that from the mid '80s to the late '80s, I think drums kind of got there was more electronic drums and there was more drum machines, and I think the drum sound for '86 on this was pretty good.
Well, yeah. If you compare that to Master of Puppets came out in '86, that drum sound is hideous.
It's something. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Another thing too, nobody else was playing prog in '86.
Well, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
It's not a problem, but
like Marillion.
Right. That's about as close as you get.
I mentioned Marillion, but look at Saga. They dialed it back. Other bands dialed it back.
Yeah.
Can't think of the other group.
But Saga only had that one record here in the States.
Worlds Apart. Yeah.
That's it.
Do you think Peter Gabriel So is overproduced?
I don't. I think it still stands up.
I do too.
I think it's timeless.
That's '86, right?
He
86.
He used an extremely commercial single to sell that album, which in the rest of the album's not that commercial, except for Big Time.
But it still kind of fits in. I don't think anything on So jumps out to say, I think it's aged very well. It could have come out yesterday. Graceland sounds great too.
Sounds awesome.
It could have came out yesterday.
Yeah.
Just certain things.
Anita Baker's Rapture is one of my favorite soft R&B or soul records. Love it. Production is spectacular. So, I mean, it depends on the band.
Depends on the band. I think the production on here is just a little bit too much, but that's all right. Okay, let's go through the rating because we probably should wrap this dog up. We've got a 9.5, a 7.5, a 7, and a 2. I'm not going to rate this because I'm going to be neutral.
The hosts don't rate.
Huh?
The hosts don't rate.
I don't seem to rate anything on the Contrarians.
No, you never do though.
On my show, I do.
You never rate.
So our average is 6.5.
Well, there you go.
Compared to what it is, I'm sure Love Beach would be much lower than this.
Oh yeah. One more thing I want to throw out there that's gonna piss off a lot of people in the comments section, and
that's okay.
That's what the Contrarians is all about.
Really, Tate's a good guy. Everybody, he's just gonna speak his mind. Don't rake him over the coals.
I like Love Beach better than the Emerson, Lake and Powell album.
So do I.
Oh,
really?
There you go.
All right, at least I'm not alone.
Rand, what about you?
Well, I love Canario and I love Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman, so that's over half the album. So yeah.
And Rich, your thoughts?
Do I like it better
than Love Beach?
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I think.
Well, there you go.
Just read the lyrics to A Taste of My Love.
I think it's more the type of music that they should have been making than what they did on Love Beach. I don't think Love Beach. There's nothing on that album I hate. I just think it's very. Like I said, it's ELP light. It's not bad, but it's definitely not. They've done better. So
A Taste of My Love, it should be rated X.
Well, whatever. So we like Love Beach. God, we should have done a show. Love Beach versus, that would have been a great show. All right. So we give it a 6.5. Now I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna say this just kind of exists. It belongs back where it did. I don't think this is a dark horse record. I think it's almost, well, 6.5 is okay, but it's not setting the world on fire. I don't think I'd consider it a dark horse record. I just think it's
Well,
just
I chose it because I didn't know what a dark horse record was, and
well, it's one of
and
those
it-
records that
it
come
was
up from
explained to
the
me.
like the horse in the race. It comes up from the
Yeah.
rear and takes it. I don't see it
Yeah.
with this one.
Well, I
Of
chose
which
George
nothing
Harrison
is
Dark Horse,
expected,
too.
much is achieved.
Say that again, Peter.
Of which nothing is expected, of which much is achieved.
There you go.
That's dark horse.
Okay.
I think this just remains where it does,
Surprise
based
success,
on
huh?
the panel. Because I don't think anybody on this panel would recommend starting out with this record, would you?
Well, if you want to do that band, yeah. They only put out one
I
record.
know, but do you think, all right, but don't you pretty much consider this part of the Emerson, Lake and Palmer catalog to some degree? It's
No.
it's
Yeah.
like
I do.
they got so what is the drummer, Carl Palmer? He's not singing. He's just
I
playing.
think it makes a difference with the name. That's all. You're just being very, like, is Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman Howe compared?
No, that's a yes record. That's a yes album.
Scott from the Frog Corner thinks so. He did it today.
Well, he's nuts. That's still a yes album by
We love
different
Scott.
name.
Just letting everybody know we love Scott.
I know. I'm just
He's a
giving
great
him crap. I still think it's a yes album by a
I
different.
do too. I
Yeah.
do too.
Honestly,
I saw
that particular album's a lot better than the stuff that Yes has been putting out the past, decade.
Have you heard the new album, Tate?
Yeah, I have. It's actually pretty good.
All right, so 6.5. I don't think this is a dark horse record. You guys might disagree. Hey, in the comments, let us know what you think. Give your rating for crying out loud, But we're going to go with the 6.5. I want to thank Rand Kelly, Peter Jones, Rich, and Tate Davis here tonight. Tate's been on the show before, but Rich, this is his virgin episode.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Welcome.
I think I'm going to be on. I'm going to be on next week for the trivia, for the trivia, and hope to be on some after that too. So
well, there's plenty more great content coming up. So
cool.
Please like, subscribe, check out the Patreon. If you want to be on these panels, you too could be on here. We've also had the Ko-fi. Check that out. More great content coming on. I want to thank these gentlemen for coming on. What a great discussion, for God's sakes. What a great topic. Thanks, Rand Kelly. And thank you, everybody. And we will see
for
you
everybody coming on.
on the next one.
Nice to meet you all.